Hey, what's up, everybody? Austin Render back with another episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. We are in episode 13 as we're about to talk some Rutgers women's basketball in just a moment. As I mentioned, I'm your host, Austin Render. This is the Dribble Drive podcast. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. We have a ton of backlogged episodes. We're available on YouTube. If you're listening to us in the podcast form, that's great. You can also check us out on the video form on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. If you're watching us on that, we're also available in podcast form on Apple and Spotify. Leave us a review, a rating, download the episode. That's the kind of stuff that helps us kind of figure out how we're doing. So we appreciate it. Our episode with Ali Papberg, now the top streamer, which is exciting, and just has been constant flow of people downloading our podcast, which I'm super excited about considering we've just now gotten into September. Can't wait for basketball season for sure. But we've got past episodes previewing Indiana, previewing Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, USC, etc. Plenty of episodes. Go back, listen to those. And we're still knocking out previews every week until the start of the season. We'll continue to knock out previews. So if your team has not been previewed yet, we're going to get there. I promise. We're making our way through here on the Dribble Drive podcast. And with that, we are going to go ahead and get into our next preview, which is a man from the Rutgers radio network, which is Ralph Bednarczyk, who's going to join us. Ralph, how are you, man? How's your summer going?
Austin, I'm great. Great to see you, hear from you. It just reminds me of cold days ahead and long trips. Seeing you, during those winter months. But and of course, always the Big Ten tournament where we all see each other and hang out for long days.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot, but we're certainly excited for basketball season, which is approaching. Certainly, you've got a lot going on right now. You're doing a lot of stuff. You said you got 9 broadcasts in the next 9 days. Got to tell us what you've been up to here this summer.
Oh yeah, I basically have broadcast all over the tri-state area. Basically, games, all various schools. So in every sport. So basically, once Labor Day hits, I'm broadcasting games all over, so the summer is calm. But I took a trip went to Nantucket for the first time, and saw what that was about. Went to England for the first time, in Scotland. Actually went to St. Andrews, which I highly recommend to everybody listening and watching. St. Andrews is, even if you're not into golf, like I'm not tremendously into golf, but I would say it's definitely worth to see from just from a visual, and it's a great little town. I would definitely recommend it just to go, even if you're not, you don't have to go play to kind of enjoy seeing St. Andrews. And I think anybody that's been there, I think, would agree with me that it is just it's sort of like because it's such a kind of remote outpost. That it's just super awesome to see, and then the little town, and then of course the university that's there too. You can visit, so you can spend a full day there. So Austin, I definitely say, and we got very lucky because the weather was A+. It was in July, and typically there, even July weather is not always very good in St. Andrews. So it's known, St. Andrews is known for bad weather. But actually in this case it worked out well.
I love that. I'm excited. We're going there in a couple of years, so we got it planned out, and that's going to be top of my bucket list. All right, who's the friend you've got with you here? We got to introduce the public.
So this is Bagel. So I didn't think that he would be on, but but he's been very needy as usual. So he's, I don't think he's going to relinquish. He's going to stay, because right after the podcast, we're going to go outside.
Oh, well, yeah. He's adorable. Bagel, for those of you listening on the podcast, Bagel is a dog sitting with Ralph here on the podcast. Hopefully has some great information on the Rutgers women's basketball team. We'll turn to Bagel later on in the podcast. But Ralph, let's talk a little bit about last year. I know it wasn't probably the year that Rutgers fans and Coach Washington had kind of in store for them. Only a couple of Big Ten wins, but how would you best kind of sum up the way last season went for Rutgers?
I would say things were kind of okay until they lose Kayleen Schmeichel, and then they also lose Maya Petticord for extended period of time. And basically, when you have 9 players and you're basically you're down to 8 consistently, and I think there was definitely what they were left with in the second half of the year. There was definitely a wear down factor, and I think that affected them certainly defensively, where. Where their points per game allowed, it was just very high. That was last in the Big Ten. So you have to start there. I mean, they gave up 73 points per game, 12 out of 14, but 332 basically out of the 360 in Division I. So that number, of course, has to come down. But the Big Ten is a high-scoring league. So the 73 sounds high, but you want to just be a little higher in terms of the defense. But I think in the second half of the year, Destiny Adams certainly showed that when she is able to stay on the court, this is a player that's going to put up major numbers. First team Big Ten level numbers. She may not get that award because so much of wins and losses are tied to it. But I think there were a couple of things that they established. And got a lot of freshmen and sophomores a lot of experience, and you hope that could that experience, because you're no longer really young anymore or inexperienced. You can't say that anymore, and that's where you go to try to go from 2-16 in the Big Ten and climb up.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you're a freshman and you play a whole season, you're no longer a freshman. You've grown up through the course of that season. And Rutgers, you mentioned it's headlined by Destiny Adams in terms of people that are coming back here this year. Plenty of others, and we'll get to them as we go through the show here. But I want to start with Destiny Adams. She comes over from North Carolina, really seemed to fit, especially toward the second half of the season. Really started to carry the offense for Rutgers. Great rebounder. How did you feel like she made her presence felt so quickly there in Piscataway?
Look, McDonald's All-American, goes to North Carolina initially, was extremely highly recruited, ahead of choosing UNC, but was a good role player at UNC in her 2 years, and then transfers to Rutgers for her final 2. And it was clear that there's tremendous raw talent. I wouldn't say raw, tremendous physical talent. And the way the game is, so much. Every player is expected to play on the perimeter, well out to the 3-point line. And so she's certainly a sensational rebounder. Showed some ability in terms of a perimeter mid-range jump shooting. But it's certainly her activity level. That is an A++ level. That in itself is at an All-American level. It's that good. And then the other areas, I think you see that slowly kind of came along in terms of just a little jump shot. But the main thing is she has to stay on the floor. For last year's team to be successful, they needed her, to be a minimum 37-minute type player. And I think for this year, the same thing is also going to exist because just great things happen when she's on the court and can stay aggressive. And if there was a statistic like any other player that if she only has maybe one foul going into the second half, that's a big deal because she can remain aggressive. If she has, let's say, 3 going into the second half, like any other player, their effectiveness comes well low because so much of her success, to me, is highlighted by her sensational aggressiveness and activity level. So finding a balance there with that is certainly, even though they're going to have more depth this year, but still you want to play her 35 minutes or so in her final year, 37 minutes, because she's just that good of a player. I think Destiny Adams could start for every team in the Big Ten. If I look up and down the rosters when I was reading previews, she could. I'd be hard pressed if she showed up to any team in the Big Ten and she wouldn't be a starter.
Yeah, she's such a good aggressive rebounder, and like you said, the foul trouble doesn't allow that aggressiveness to kind of come out when you're dealing with 2, 3, 4 fouls in that third, fourth quarter time. So it's certainly an important part of her game. A lot else coming back for Rutgers. Obviously, Schmeichel leaves, a couple others leave, but a decent chunk of last year's production returns. How important is that for someone like Coqueluche Washington in her third year with this program to have so much continuity to build off of this year?
Exactly. I think, Austin, that's the key word, because there is, and I think the other key word is that while it's not a foundation in terms of a lot of victories, but it is a foundation that actually is established. Like, there is a building now that you can see, because they are bringing back seven players. Basically, one, Kennedy Brandt, got put on scholarship at the end of the season, was a recruited walk-on, so she's a sophomore, and then Awa Sidibe was hurt, tore her ACL in July of 23. So basically, but they're bringing back 5 rotation players that played tons of minutes. Maya Petticourt being one of them, who missed basically 35% of the season. She played 20 games, so she didn't play the full season. But there's a lot of minutes under their belts, and when you look at the recent continuity, that is the most significant part. That there is already a lot that has a decent amount that's been established compared to the previous 2 teams. So at least in terms of November, December, there is, I think there's just more water under the bridge to build on from that standpoint. And I think the positions that the players played, I think they will stay there. So there's not going to be a whole lot of change for them to experience. And that's always significant. I mean, right now in the college basketball world, the running joke is just going to be, you look at the men's and women's side, teams are averaging like 8 new players a year. It just never used to be that way, Austin. You're a young guy, but that just didn't exist intentionally. And now it is becoming where you're turning over your roster heavily. So if you have players back, I think among the most valuable things now in college basketball is retaining your own players, because you start off at such a high level, and I think that has value in November, and that's where you can pick some people off that has significance at the end of the year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And looking at this Rutgers team, we've mentioned Destiny Adams. You mentioned Maya Petticourt, somebody who will come back, a double-digit scorer for Rutgers. China Cornwell, Lisa Thompson. And I'm curious on Awa Sidibe, somebody who we've seen before, but obviously didn't get to see last year with the torn ACL. For those maybe unfamiliar, as she comes back to this program, what is it that she will bring to Rutgers this year?
Yeah, I think she's basically kind of a do-it-all super utility player. Like, for example, 2 years ago, 9 points a game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, nearly a block. Going to be a 6th-year player. Tremendous, just a tremendous student athlete, and truly a role model. Really wants to go into medical school, and that's I think that is significant just from a leadership standpoint when they are still extremely young, and that she came back, I think, for this year too. I wasn't completely sure that would happen, but once she had, I think, the torn ACL, I think probably the feeling was you don't want to end your career that way, and especially in full scholarship sports like basketball, so you can come back and do more studies. But I think it's just a super utility perspective and a consistency because she is an older player and can guard basically about a 5'11", 6-foot perimeter player. That always has value in a conference like the Big Ten, where the wings are so good. I don't think she'll play much 4 position. I see her probably playing kind of some 3. And this year is probably her role, I would think, but we'll see. Because based on the depth chart, I think that probably at the 4 spot, they're probably a little bit more covered. But compared to 2 years ago, but there's always value for super utility players that can contribute and play a role consistently, especially when they're that experience now, and in the Big Ten, it's because the little things are going to make such a difference now because everybody is going to be so good.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. This is a a league that's going to be dominated. And I think there's some good bigs around the country. And when you have somebody who can play those several positions, kind of at a wing forward position, it's valuable. You mentioned this landscape of college basketball. There's always new people coming in. Rutgers is no different. They bring in a couple of transfers: JoJo Lacey from Boston College, Janae Walker from Kentucky. What do you know about what Rutgers is getting out of those two transfers?
Oh. Hello?
Yep, we got you. I got you back now. We're talking transfers. Yep. What do you know about these two Rutgers transfers coming in?
Yeah, basically, so JoJo Lacey from Boston College has experience at 6'1", can slash. Honestly, is a little bit more of a 3 compared to Awa Sidibe. So I'm expecting her to play a significant role defensively. Rutgers right now, last year, for example, they lost Jillian Herder, who basically was playing shooting guard, Erica Lafayette, and then when they had Kayleen Schmeichel. So basically, if you look at a lineup that they had, I'm projecting Lisa Thompson, Maya Petticord to be opening night starters, at least in the backcourt, and then we'll see how freshman Keomi McMiller will factor in, I'm sure, greatly, just not necessarily perhaps in a 35-minute spot yet. But so I'm expecting Lacey to probably be the leader in the clubhouse at the 3, at least for opening day, due to her experience, because she can do a good amount of everything. Not a superior shooter, but I think this team, she kind of will provide some of what Destiny Adams provides from a big position, whereas defense, activity, run the floor, and especially, again, in the Big Ten, someone else with size and length where you can play man-to-man and someone that's a difficult person to break down for opposing guards. And then the other, Janae Walker, highly recruited, went to Kentucky, played some, and it looked like she was going to be projected to play a lot more at Kentucky. But of course, Kentucky had a coaching change, so she enters the portal, and they had a great need for a young, true post player. When you look at the way the roster stacks up, for upcoming seasons. So there is a great need. Certainly I expect it's going to be Adams and China Cornwell as the starting 4 and 5. But then I'm seeing that, I figure Janae Walker will be the third big in that case. And then we'll see, beyond that, how that might work. And then they have but I'm expecting Janae Walker, probably just because of her experience and a length, that this is a true center. And again, in the Big Ten, everybody plays big, Austin. Everybody has, you look around, everybody's 4 is really a post player. There's no undersized 4s that play. All the centers are significant. Back you. Many of them are back you into the basket and kill you inside. There is just you can't. You have to have rosters with players that can provide some resistance at the rim. Even though we know it's an offensive league, but everybody has players that if you have a gaping vacancy in the post, they're going to hurt you. It's just the rosters just are set up that way.
Yeah, no doubt about that. This is a league that has, I think, over the last couple of years, really developed bigs very well. They're adding more from USC with Kiki Iriafa and UCLA with Lauren Betts. Oregon's got really good posts as well. So there's only more joining the league as this league gets bigger. You mentioned Keomi McMillan, a top 20, 25 recruit nationally, just depending on where you look. You mentioned maybe not a starter day one, but certainly an impact player. What do you expect to see from her as she arrives in Piscataway?
I expect, first of all, flair and excitement and an energy level of basically, the other aspect last year was really, Lisa Thompson playing so many minutes her freshman year. And I think everybody thinks about, okay, well, it's an adjustment, of course, to college basketball. and of course that's true. But I think there is also a physical adjustment to when you jump out and all of a sudden you're playing the way Thompson. I'll look up how many minutes she averaged last year. But when you're playing that many minutes, it's a player, or you can expect them to wear down. So that's the first thing that Keone McMiller, I think, is going to be able to come in basically with her speed. Like, for example, number 27 overall player on the ESPN.com Hoop Girls. And she played at Life Center Academy, but in South Jersey, which plays a very competitive schedule, and of course on the AAU circuit. Played for one of the upper echelon teams that always went and had deep runs in tournaments. So I'm expecting kind of her speed element to be very similar to what Lisa Thompson kind of provides, and I'm expecting kind of like a jump start player, that even if she's not starting right away, but she's someone that's going to be able to push the pace and tempo, and not a small guard either. I think they had listed her like 5'7". So this is someone that is just basically someone that immediately comes in a game and is thinking about pushing the tempo hard and thinking about scoring. And so that may not be a classic point guard. So I think that may be from a role perspective. And then, of course, adjusting defensively. Because she's kind of such a high energy player, I think that'll also be an adjustment. But the mentality that she'll provide, I think, is significant. I don't know if there's many teams that have players that are such maybe accomplished scorers that can come in games. The way I see it, at least early season, if she doesn't start or come in and play that role. So it's a significant piece, Austin, because. Now this is a player that kind of maybe changes the offense, where you can space the floor and you have another player to add in that is a pure, hungry scorer for this level of basketball.
And Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to be such a big addition to this Rutgers team that at times struggled to find consistent offense, especially from its guard play. It's going to be huge to have somebody who's going to be dynamic like that.
Yeah, no doubt, because again, not just losing Schmeichel midway through last year, basically right around January 1st, but also Maya Petticord, missed so much time. So Petticord is a combo guard. It was her first year at Rutgers. Spent her freshman year at Texas A&M, where she was like the 11th man on a deep Texas A&M team that played a big rotation, and was basically the third point guard. Last year, Rutgers was a starting two, but it really classifies as a combo guard. Very capable scorer. When she was healthy, and again, she was someone that came back from injury and then missed another small segment of time due to injury. So that is significant that they can maybe have someone similar in mentality or at that level of Petticord in terms of wanting to be a scorer and a ultra confident player. So that's kind of what McMiller projects. And there's going to be highs and lows, but certainly from an energy level perspective, I think that's kind of what I'm seeing, that McMiller is going to come in and kind of be ready to be in attack mode right away as a freshman offensively. And I think that is a big deal. I'm not expecting there to be a learning curve or an adjustment period of, all right, got to gain confidence to be a scorer. At this level, I'm expecting, and that is going to be significant for this team. That certainly when she's on the floor, there's going to be no doubt that there's someone that wants to hunt shots.
And that's huge as a freshman, to have somebody who can come in already with that confidence, that scorer's mentality, certainly going to be big. Let's talk a little bit more big picture for Rutgers. The non-conference schedule includes a trip to Virginia Tech, some good matchups against Princeton, Marquette. When you got kind of a look at this non-conference schedule for Rutgers, what stands out to you and what you might see early in the season for the Scarlet Knights?
Yeah, and Austin, actually, even off podcast, I would definitely ask you if you've noticed what the Indiana schedule looks like, and if I've had a chance to look at if there is a little bit more of a trend of playing even more at home now in this larger Big Ten. So the Scarlet Knights are going 10 of their 11 non-conference games at home at Jersey Mike's. The lone road game is a significant one, certainly on paper, at Virginia Tech, who, of course, 2 years ago went to the Final Four, but they just obviously they just had a tremendous overhaul, losing Liz Kitley, Georgia Amore, transfers and follows Coach Kenny Brooks over to Kentucky, and Kitley out of eligibility, and now in the WNBA. So it's not the same, probably the same level Virginia Tech program, but still. Big deal, I think, and that's in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. But I'm thinking that, in this first year of this now gigantic Big Ten, I think coaches felt there is now, because of the road trips, the 2 extra long West Coast road trips that you're typically going to get, you probably have to make your non-conference be even more home-centric. And I don't know, and it's going to be strange how the NCAA committee looks at this, because in the bigger picture, the Big Ten conference season becomes even more of a grind. It already was, and every league will say it's a grind, it's for their league. But from a travel perspective, there is no other league, in my opinion, that has more of a travel grind now than the Big Ten. I don't see that from the other power conference leagues, or even the mid-major. I don't see, there is no other travel grind. So I think these coaches are thinking our non-conference basically has to be at home. So they're playing 10 out of 11. Obviously some of the quality competition, locally, hosting a tournament, having basically Princeton, Marquette, who have been good. Princeton will be a touchdown because Caitlin Chen, their point guard, grad transferred to UConn, of all places, tremendous player. And Marquette, new coaching staff, they've been good, but Marquette is going through a little bit of a transition. So, and then the at Virginia Tech game. So it's a very manageable non-conference. And I think we're seeing the first kind of dart throw, Austin, at non-conference scheduling in Big Ten women's basketball, and I'm certainly men's hoops, that coaches. I know everybody says got to go play on the road, got to go on the road and win on the road. I'm not sure if that. I know that philosophy gets rewarded in selection time. I don't know if you get rewarded in the grand scheme of things in Big Ten women's hoops by doing 3 tough road games, and then you go into conference where you look at some of the schedules, it might be 3 very long flights in a season on top of everything. So I think this is the first blueprint. And what do you make of that, Austin? I mean, what's Indiana's schedule look like? Have you looked at any others?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I hadn't thought about that point of view. Indiana only has 1 true road game that's at Butler, which is in the state. It's an hour drive. That's an easy one. Part of Indiana's, I think, is because the Stanford, Maine were on the backside of the home and home. So last year we went to both of them. This year they both come to us. I don't know if that's part of it as well. They go to the Bahamas, but it is interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It is going to be different with the scheduling, especially for a team like Rutgers, who even before the addition of the West Coast schools, when Rutgers got to fly out to Iowa or Nebraska or Wisconsin, that's a haul. And now you're adding on another trip to, or you guys drew Washington, Oregon as the road trip. So there's another big flight. So that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. Now you're going to make me go back and do some research here and see if that's kind of the theme around the Big Ten. Talking a little bit about that Big Ten draw, as you mentioned, Rutgers goes to Washington and Oregon. You'll come to Bloomington, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, You get Illinois at home. You get Ohio State, the defending conference champs, at home. You get both LA schools traveling all the way across the country to play at Jersey Mike's Arena. Do you have any thoughts? I know it's hard in September to have any thoughts of the Big Ten, and we'll obviously get a full schedule hopefully later this month. But do you have any thoughts on kind of the home away draw that Rutgers got?
I think that first of all, every coach is going to say, wow, I don't know what we did to deserve this schedule we got, but that's just what it's going to be. So Rutgers is playing 3 league games very far away, right? At Iowa, at UW, and at Oregon. And I presume, Austin, that the at Washington, at Oregon will stay one road trip.
Yeah.
I would, right? That has to be correct.
That's kind of been the consensus, I think, of most of us who've been on this podcast. We're kind of assuming that we're making one trip to wherever West Coast destination you're going.
And it's got to be basically a Friday, Sunday slate, something along those lines, I would think. So it basically would look like a Pac-12 schedule. So basically for all those schools, they're used to playing Friday, Sunday. Except usually it used to be, Washington State for those schools now, but UW, Oregon, it's a flight in between anyway, just like Washington State was for everybody there. So that's what I'm presuming, that will be one trip, and then they'll have at Iowa. But because of the grind of it, I just think that there is going to be a scheduling philosophy where coaches will just say, you know what, aside from those multi-team events, over Thanksgiving, like this year, Rutgers is not in one, at least like Bahamas, like they're hosting one. But will programs still do those as much out of the Big Ten? And then I'd be curious to see too, Austin, to research, are there more home non-conference games just, for regular programs, this year than, let's say, the last 5? Rutgers has an advantage because they basically in the tri-state area, there's 18 Division I programs, within basically, downtown Manhattan. So you can bus and home every year, good, solid mid-major teams. You have 2 big, basically you have like 3 Big East schools, basically within the decent area. Some of the other Big Tens, that's not the case. Minnesota only has 1 other Division I in the entire state. So in St. Thomas. So but they're also centrally located, so they can maybe the grind for them in terms of the short flights and even the West Coast trips maybe isn't as much. So it's going to be very interesting to talk about at the end of the season and just hear coaches' comments, what they think, how it went, and then what could be done better to make this feel less of an NBA grind where you're going to have to rest players somewhere. I mean, is that the next thing where you have to consider a load management aspect?
It's a lot of new questions that come up with this. We'll have our Dribble Drive stats crew research department look into that, and that, I guess that's me. But hey, Ralph.
I would even ask Ali Patberg, what is too much? What is too much being on the road? I think that would be to ask an ex-player.
Yeah, that'd be a good question. Absolutely. We're definitely going to have to get to the bottom of this as the schedule comes out. We get a little closer to the season. Ralph, this has been wonderful. Great to chat with you. It's been good to see you, and we'll look forward to catching up throughout the basketball season.
You got it, Austin. Always great. I'll see you along the way.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks to everybody for listening as we continue to drop episodes every Monday on the Back Home Network YouTube channel live at 7 o'clock, and then they go into podcast form after that. We will continue hitting on previews as we get closer to that first week of November. Bednarczyk, I'm Austin Render saying so long on the Dribble Drive podcast.